Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Blitzkrieg, our own strategic affairs show. Today, I'm going to speak about the coronavirus. I'm going to speak about China, I'm going to speak about post-coronavirus China and its relationship with the rest of the world. I have a few points which I've quickly jotted down, and I wanted to speak to you through these points. Now, first of all, there was this meeting with Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, with the Chinese, and the Chinese said, we don't like it being called the Chinese virus. The coronavirus should not be called the Chinese virus. And my question is, why not? Why not? Let's make it a playing field. Let's make it a playing field for equals. The Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or the MERS, is named after the Middle East. The African swine fever has Africa's name. So the Middle East did not object. Africa did not object. And then, of course, we have the local Delhi belly, though it's just a rumbling tummy and not very serious. But cities and nations have traditionally been identified by their names. They have been identified from the source from which the disease came. And the Chinese virus or the coronavirus should be no different. Now, I have an analogy here that I want to share with you. And as a former soldier, this is something which sort of touched me when I first read about this. It hit me hard. Now, what is an explosive? You're all aware that it's used as a weapon. It explodes, it damages buildings, properties, it kills people. What is an explosive? An explosive can be handled, it can be managed, it is controlled, it is stable, and it is directional. Which means that an explosive ideally should be controlled. It should be stable, which means that it should not explode whenever it becomes unstable. It should explode when the user wants it to explode, and it should be directional, which means that you can use the explosive in the direction or the type that you want it to be used. Now, don't you think that looks mysteriously like the coronavirus? What happened when China started hiding the fatalities of the coronavirus, when WHO, the World Health Organization, spoke the Chinese language and told the world that no, it's not dangerous. The coronavirus is not dangerous. Put millions of lives at risk. What was China doing all this while? It was making sure that this virus was directional. Who is China's biggest opponent? America. Whether it's military or whether it is the economic market, the commercial market which China has all over the world. China has today only one competition, that is America. And today, America is on its knees. Italy is on its knees. France, Germany, India. Everybody who's opposed to China is almost on the brink of a national emergency. India has declared lockdown. Now, I want to ask you, viewers, if this does not look like a weapon, then what looks like a weapon to you? I'm not saying that this is part of the Chinese biological warfare strategy. This is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that somewhere along the line, a virus was weaponized by China deliberately to hammer its enemies. China is selling medical equipment to much of the world. Even India has ordered for around 2,000 ventilators from China. So this is perfect. This is a fantastic scenario. China creates a virus. China spreads the virus across the world. It shuts down Wuhan. It doesn't allow the virus to spread to Beijing or Shanghai or any other major town and city of China. It controls the virus. Having done that, now what China is doing is selling medical equipment to the rest of the world, because China is the epicenter of manufacturing of the world. And this is where I think the world has stumbled in the past. The world has not taken it seriously. The world was busy with software. The world was busy with inventions. And why not? Inventions are important. Software is important. But so is hardware. And today, in times of these emergencies, we sort of realize how important hardware is. And hardware is what China makes. We have to understand, viewers, that China's power comes not from its military. In the previous episode with Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, there was a very valid point that was made by the general. China has ignored its navy. And this has been China's loss. China has ignored its armed forces for economic gain. That has given China top-class economy. But what is that economy based on? If you check the past 10 Chinese Nobel Prize winners, they are mostly American Chinese, which means that they were not living in China when they were given those Nobel Prizes. They were outside. They were in America, some of them were in Japan or in Europe. Basically Chinese American citizens, not pure Chinese, doing research inside China. Because in China, ladies and gentlemen, research does not pay the kind of dividends that only manufacturing does. So what China does is take technology from other countries, steal technology from other countries, package it in a certain manner, use its huge manpower base, use its manufacturing muscle to create something that is cheap and then flood the world's market with those cheap goods. That is what China has been traditionally doing. That is China's muscle. That is China's strength. I want to ask you, when was the last time China won a military conflict? Coming back to my point of view, China's power is not military. China's power is economic. Now it's writing big checks. It's spending money to upgrade its military. But the fact remains that the Chinese muscle comes from its checkbook. Then how do you contain China? How do you manage China in the post-corona world? Before we do that, 4 things that China invented, you must know. And these are directly related to how we will manage China in the post-corona world. The Chinese invented the compass, they invented gunpowder, they invented the paper, and they invented printing. Now all these things were invented, or most of these things were invented more than 1,000 years back. So there has been no great initiative from China. There has been no great invention, no great discovery which has come out of China. All this is dependent upon a controlled environment of manufacturing where the states supports certain manufacturers. Now what do? India, countries like India, countries like Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia, Thailand, these countries must get together to form some sort of an Asian, if I may use the word, European Union of kinds. So I'm not talking about a political union, I'm talking about an economic union between these countries. Get together. All of them are individual economic powerhouses in their own might. Indonesia is coming up very well. Vietnam is a powerhouse. Taiwan is a powerhouse. India has done very well and is continuing to do well in the field of manufacturing. It is going up. We must get together. We must have common interest, and together we must take on China. This blackmail by China, this use of China of its military muscle. I will give you an example and then you will understand. What is the China-Pakistan economic corridor? We've all heard that it's a 3,000-mile corridor which comes from China into Gwadar, Balochistan. But do we actually think that it has only commercial aims? No, it has a very, very strong military aim, which is why you have Chinese submarines and Chinese ships docking at Gwadar port. Gwadar port has not really taken off, but it gives China a handle to control this part of the world. China sees India as an emerging threat, and China will continue to see India as an emerging threat and have the string of pearls acquisitions all around, whether it's the South China Sea, whether it's the Hambantota port here, down south in Sri Lanka, whether it's the Gwadar port here in Pakistan, or even the One Belt, One Road initiative on top, the Silk Road, etc., etc. All these things are something that China has done very successfully using its humongous checkbook. If we are to counter China, we must understand that our only hope lies in cooperation with the countries that I mentioned: Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia, Malaysia, India. All these countries must get together and form a manufacturing behemoth. All these countries must together dig in their heels and take on China. And of course, there is the Quad. Countries like America, Japan, Australia and India, which are actually forming a force, a global force, to push back against the hegemony of China. When we talk about China in the long term, in the post-coronavirus age, it is very clear that China's credibility has taken a massive hammering. China is no longer the giant. It's no longer that 800-pound gorilla in the backseat of the car. People are, if I may use the word, lesser scared of China than they were before. Now, this is the time, my friends, that we must take advantage of. This is the time when we sort of go and tell China that we are emerging. We push back China. Friends, there are 2 other things that we can do as a nation. Get everybody together and file cases against China. Some countries have already spoken about going to the International Court of Justice. China must pay for what it has done. There is no way around it. China must pay. It has demolished economies It is directly responsible for the death of thousands of people, and I don't know, God forbid, but I don't know how many more people will die before we finally vanquish COVID-19. Who's responsible? Obviously, it's China, and China must be made to pay for its mistakes. The other thing that we can do is, if you remember, there was a time when India gave shelter, gave diplomatic cover to the Dalai Lama and the entire Tibet movement. Today, the government, the Tibetan government in exile, is in Dharamshala. The movement is alive and kicking and healthy. And India supports Free Tibet, which is why the Dalai Lama is in India. We should do the same with Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the nerve of China. When people speak about Hong Kong, China gets paranoid. China gets tremendously angry. We must expose China for being an autocracy. We must expose Xi Jinping for being the so-called emperor of China. What must India do apart from getting all these countries that I mentioned together and forming an economic bloc against China? What else can we do? One, India must file a case against China in the International Court of Justice. China has done great harm to our economy. It has caused the death of our citizens. It is not just a simple case of a pandemic which has gone out of control. China's culpability arises from the fact that China hid the dangers of the coronavirus. When COVID-19 spread across the world, China hid its own numbers. It is still lying about its numbers. And this is why China must be held to account. It has caused death of Indian citizens. We must not shy away from doing this. And another thing that we must do is, like we did in the good old days, when we supported the Dalai Lama in the Tibetan movement, we gave them a place in Dharamshala to set up a Tibetan government in exile. This is exactly what we must do today. We must support the democracy protests in Hong Kong. The day India officially speaks about its concerns on China's human rights record in Hong Kong, that is the time when India would have lent its shoulder to the protests. This is the time when the Great Wall of China will start crumbling. Thank you for joining us, and meet you in a few days with another episode of Blitzkrieg. Till then, from my team and I, Jai Hind.